Today's episode is presented by Vaer. Vaer was founded with the goal of building an affordable, everyday wristwatch that blends tasteful design with extreme durability and functionality. Vaer is a true American watch company specializing in both quartz and automatic watches. Vaer is offering our listeners 15% off if you use the code PODGO15, that is PODGO15. Go to vaerwatches.com, VAER, to learn more and get your new timepiece today. Now, onto the show. Today is Friday, September 4th, and thanks for ending the week with me. Usually, Fridays are actually pretty quiet, but today is not one of those days. With everything from Biden and Kenosha, to COVID information, to salons, to losers, it's going to be a fun one, so let's get caught up. We'll start out with the story that's everywhere right now, especially on social media, which is surprising to me, but we'll get to that in a bit. It is, of course, the story in The Atlantic about Donald Trump calling people who died in war losers and suckers. This is from Jeffrey Goldberg, again in The Atlantic, and it sets the scene all the way back in 2018 when Trump was in Paris. He was supposed to visit a cemetery for soldiers who died in war, and if you'll remember, he didn't actually end up going because he said the helicopter couldn't fly because it was raining. And there was a big deal about that, obviously because he was afraid of a little rain. He also tried to claim that the Secret Service wouldn't drive him there, but Jeffrey Goldberg says neither claim was true. In reality, he says, Trump rejected the idea of the visit because he feared his hair would become disheveled in the rain, and because he did not believe it was important to honor American war dead, and that is according to 4 people with first-hand knowledge of the discussion that day. He goes on to say, in a conversation with senior staff members on the morning of the scheduled visit, Trump said, quote, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." It continues, in a separate conversation on the same trip, Trump referred to more than 1,800 Marines who lost their lives at Belleau Wood as, quote, suckers for getting killed. Belleau Wood was apparently a consequential battle in American history. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I'm just reading what's in the article here. And it says that in that same trip, talking about World War I, Trump asked, "Who are the good guys in this war?" He also said that he didn't understand why the United States would intervene on the side of the Allies. Now, you'll remember he said this about John McCain back in 2015.
But, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that, because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero. He's a war hero. He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
The article says that Trump had remained fixated on McCain, and that when he died back in August 2018, Trump told his senior staff, this time according to 3 sources with direct knowledge, quote, "We're not going to support that loser's funeral," end quote, and that he became furious when he saw flags lowered to half-staff, saying, quote, "What the F are we doing that for? Guy was a effing loser." The White House denies this whole report, by the way, saying that yada yada yada, Trump's supported the military more than any president. The article continues, according to sources with knowledge of the president's views, he seems to genuinely not understand why Americans treat former prisoners of war with respect. Nor does he understand why pilots who are shot down in combat are honored by the military. On at least 2 occasions since becoming president, according to 3 sources with direct knowledge of his views, Trump referred to former President George H.W. Bush as a, quote, loser for being shot down by the Japanese. This is where it starts to really get cruel. On Memorial Day 2017, Trump went with then Department of Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly to Arlington Cemetery. The article says the 2 men were set to visit Section 60, the 14-acre area of the cemetery that is burial ground for those killed in America's most recent wars. Kelly's son Robert is buried in Section 60. According to sources with knowledge of this visit, Trump, while standing by Robert Kelly's grave, turned directly to John Kelly and said, quote, "I don't get it. What was in it for them?" Kelly said he originally thought Trump was making a ham-handed reference to the selflessness of America's all-volunteer force. but later he came to realize that Trump simply does not understand non-transactional life choices. This is coming from one of Kelly's friends, who Goldberg says is a retired 4-star general. This friend says, quote, "He can't fathom the idea of doing something for someone other than himself. He just thinks that anyone who does anything when there's no direct personal gain to be had is a sucker. There's no money in serving the nation. Trump can't imagine anyone else's pain. That's why he would say this to the father of a fallen Marine on Memorial Day in the cemetery where he's buried." It goes on to talk about how Trump has basically used the military as props, how he thinks they answer only to him, not the Constitution, as evidenced by his gassing of peaceful protesters. An officer who had first-hand knowledge of Trump's views says, quote, "He has a lot of fear. He doesn't see the heroism in fighting." And then Goldberg says, "Several observers told me that Trump is deeply anxious about dying or being disfigured, and this worry manifests itself as disgust for those who have suffered." Then it tells another story about how Trump falsely claimed he called, quote, "virtually all of the family members of service members who had died during his term." And then when families started speaking out and saying, "No, you didn't," Trump had to begin rush shipping condolence letters to those families. The last paragraph it ends on, which is actually pretty profound. I didn't expect, something so big to be saved for the end. I thought it would be the author's own thoughts. But it says, "In a 2018 White House planning meeting for such an event, Trump asked his staff not to include wounded veterans on grounds that spectators would feel uncomfortable in the presence of amputees. Quote, nobody wants to see that." End quote. I think to me, the details really do add credibility, and he says he's talking to 3 or 4 sources all the time. But it got really interesting here when the Associated Press confirmed his sources, essentially. This tweet from James Laporta, an investigative reporter, former Marine infantryman, now obviously with the Associated Press. Laporta tweeted out yesterday, "A senior Defense Department official I just spoke with confirmed this story by Jeffrey Goldberg in its entirety, especially the graphs about late Senator John McCain and former Marine General John Kelly, President Donald Trump's former chief of staff." So, before that, you had people trying to push, "Oh, he wouldn't say this. Of course he didn't say this. This is false." Trump himself devoted 3 tweets to claiming that it was just a hoax made up by the media who are hungry to, end his political career. But yeah, that was definitely a big shock when AP came out and essentially confirmed most of the story. Republicans are doing their usual, remaining silent or denying that it's still true. And I just don't know how you could say it's not true when he said this in public.
But, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that, because I don't like losers.
It was right out there. And this other tweet from just some random Twitter account, but it made me think. "The commander-in-chief was found guilty of stealing money from a kids' cancer charity, mocks disabled reporters, gasses protesters for photo ops, over 20,000 lies, kills 190,000 Americans, violates civil rights, incites violence, and calls fallen soldiers losers and suckers." Yeah, I guess if you put it against everything we know about Trump, name-calling certainly seems to be in his wheelhouse. I mentioned I was surprised that this came to be a big story, because when I read it, I was just like, yeah, of course he said that. But now it's getting shared on Facebook and Twitter more than I saw the bounty stuff shared, and we'll have to see if this energy keeps up. But I was just like, you guys are this offended over name-calling and not actual bounties that Russia put on the heads of American soldiers and the Taliban collected on? I don't know. I think our priorities are just in the wrong place. But anything to get this guy out of there. This story from the Big Ten is just another example to show that coronavirus isn't just a, you're fine, you get over it, or you die, sort of a thing. The doctor for Penn State's football team has come out and revealed that 30 to 35% of all Big Ten athletes who tested positive at all for coronavirus, meaning symptomatic or asymptomatic, developed some kind of myocarditis. Myocarditis, I think that's how you say it, is the inflammation of the heart muscle, and symptoms include chest pain, dizziness, shortness of breath, abnormal heartbeat, fatigue, and even more. As is the case with most heart conditions, it could lead to death if it's left untreated. Knowing this, it makes even more sense that the Big Ten postpone their football season. Not only could this lead to serious problems in their everyday lives, It could change their entire future outlook if they plan on going pro. The doctor emphasized that this condition could make an elite player become just average. I guess it just goes to show that no matter what age or physical shape you're in, it can really cause some damage, even if you don't die. It's not just life or death. Hang on now, let's get to the real big scandal. Nancy Pelosi visiting a hair salon. Yes, indeed. As I'm sure you've heard by now, the huge scandal that Fox News and every other right-wing source is running with is this revelation that Speaker Pelosi had her hair washed and blow-dried at a salon back in California. Now, just off the bat here, and forgive my ignorance, but unless this is code for some other hairstyling thing, my first reaction was, why in God's green earth did she need to go somewhere to have her hair washed and dried? Can't you do that at home? Like, almost every day? My other big question is, why did the salon owner let her go there if she was just going to throw such a fit? Maybe the fact that she was on Tucker Carlson either the same day or the next day from when the story broke shows us that she's a teeny tiny bit starved for attention. I think two things can be true here. One, Pelosi was wrong for getting special treatment. I don't want to follow other news outlets and make this the same as her emails was for Hillary in 2016. It's not nearly as alarming, and that wasn't even, that was what it was. But I would feel a little bit bad not saying that it wasn't a bit strange or, special treatment, because then I just, if there's one thing I don't want to turn into, it's hypocrites, because that's what happened to the other side there. But at the same time, since these salons can only be open air, and you can only have your hair cut outside, I don't know. I think the person who is third in line to the presidency probably shouldn't be outside for, however long that would take, 30 minutes to an hour. I just think that poses some risks, so maybe she really did have to be inside somehow. There's a lot of questions about it, for sure. But at the same time, I also agree with Pelosi that she was probably set up by the salon owner. I mean, there's no way you're on Tucker's White Power Hour unless you're really devoted to the Trump cause. Now, of course, Kayleigh McAleer, or, whatever you want to pronounce her name as, played the security camera footage on a loop during the press briefing yesterday. I mean, this is basically the same level of offense that Obama's tan suit was, and they are just running with it. I mean, unbelievable. It's just ridiculous. But actually, it does get a little bit crazier, actually a lot, since Donald Trump is now suggesting the salon owner should run for Congress and take Nancy Pelosi's job as Speaker. Yep, a salon owner. That's it. That's all the prerequisite you need to be third in line to the presidency in Donald Trump's mind. Maybe it's because he got there with no prior politics experience or really any experience of leading anything. That's why he suggests that she should do this, but normal presidents would not have done this. Some disheartening news for fans of the Batman like myself. Just a little bit after production got back underway, they resumed shooting in London for the 2021 movie The Batman. It was reported that they had to halt production for a little bit because someone had tested positive. Vanity Fair is reporting that that was Robert Pattinson, Bruce Wayne / Batman himself, but Warner Brothers isn't commenting to keep the privacy of, whoever it is. But man, after seeing that trailer a couple weeks ago, I've been all in on the hype. So I was really looking forward to getting this thing back into production, getting the rest of it shot, because this thing has been delayed enough. We don't need another year. At the same time, I just don't want to have them rush and put out a bad product. But clearly they haven't been thinking that because it, again, has been delayed so much. Getting into some Joe Biden news now. He started the day by getting another endorsement from another big Republican figure in politics. This time from former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder. Now, Rick Snyder, as he makes very clear in his endorsement here, is no closet liberal or closet Democrat who's actually, been a Democrat all along. And surprise, here he comes. But no, he really makes the point that he stands up for Republican policies and values. And that's part of the reason that Trump disgusts him so much is because he stands for none of it. It's just all about himself. He talks about how Trump isn't unifying the nation, how he doesn't listen to anyone but himself, and basically the need to bring back civility to the office. and he admires how Joe Biden has expressed the desire to heal this nation, to listen to people other than himself. So he did end up endorsing Joe Biden in that column for USA Today. So that was a good start to the day for Joe Biden. Then he came to my neck of the woods here in Kenosha. The theme of the day for Biden was both healing and repairing, as well as making racism bad again. He spoke at a church about the connection between what happened in Kenosha and what happened in Charlottesville back in 2017, which he says is the reason he decided to run for president. And he ended up saying, quote, "It's not all Trump's fault, but it legitimized a dark side of human nature. What it did, though, was also expose what had not been paid enough attention to, the underlying racism that is institutionalized in the United States that still exists and has for 400 years. So we end up with a circumstance like we have here in Kenosha." End quote. That was during some remarks at a church. At the church, he also heard from a white business owner who said her store had been destroyed by rioters, as well as a black attorney who pleaded with him to address criminal justice reform. That was after he had already met with the Blake family and, heard what they had to say. The members of the Blake family were Jacob Blake's father, brother, 2 sisters, and members of his legal team. And Blake and his mother called in from the hospital. Ben Crump, the family's attorney, said Biden's conversation focused on changing the disparate treatment of minorities in police interactions, the impact of selecting Kamala Harris as a black woman as his running mate, and Vice President Biden's plans for change. The vice president told the family that he believes the best of America is in all of us, and that we need to value all our differences as we come together in America's great melting pot. It was very obvious that Vice President Biden cared, as he extended to Jacob Jr. a sense of humanity, treating him as a person worthy of consideration and prayer. So, essentially, it was a huge contrast to Trump, who only met with law enforcement and was focused on, the rioters, they're coming for your suburban house or whatever. Whereas Biden actually acknowledged that racism exists, institutional racism in America, which Trump said didn't. And he met with the family and was a normal human being, I think. It's probably the best way to put it. But listen to this. This is just... whew. Trump campaign spokesman Tim Murtaugh, he said this: "Joe Biden made a political trip to Kenosha today, his first visit to Wisconsin, after months of saying he could not travel because of the science of coronavirus. What changed was political science, as he knows he is in serious decline in the polls." False on every level. Well, it was his first trip to Wisconsin. But the thing about it is, to act like Donald Trump's visit wasn't political is just... they're used to lying, but that's just so plain. So again, as this entire campaign has been essentially, it was a huge contrast to what Donald Trump did when he came here. And I think it could provide some very powerful visuals. Alright, that's going to do it for me here this week. 2 things. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow for Quick News to Go, the weekly recap show where I just combine all the shows from the week, just in case you missed anything. Also, again, don't forget to give feedback in any way you'd like, publicly, privately. Any feedback is always very welcome. I am leaning towards no show on Monday, since it will be the Labor Day holiday and I'll be getting ready to go back to school. So, again, leaning towards no show on Monday. But until I see you, whenever that is next, or, I guess, whenever you listen to the show, whenever that is next, stay safe out there, especially with the holiday. Make your plan to vote, fill out your census, and have a great time out there.